So I'm talking about range anxiety, charging anxiety, and even though they're not realistic, they're very true in the minds of people that are thinking about switching. The main problem with electric mobility is you're buying into the future, but the experience paradigm, like the actual experience that you get when you get an electric vehicle, is for a large part feels like a puzzle. Right? It's just everything is different. It's inherently different than an ICE. So even though instant torque is an incredible experience, like driving these things is amazing. But if you are a family or if you need to rely on this to make sure it doesn't affect your TCO, if you own a business and this is like very critical, then this puzzle makes it scary to go through this electrification, to go through the adoption of this technology. And we essentially just wanted to take that away.
Welcome to another episode of the eMobility Marketing Podcast. I'm your host, Theo, and today we're talking about one of the biggest challenges in our industry, why CPO growth often gets stuck and how data can help us move forward and grow utilization. My guest today is Gideon van Dijk, CEO of Chargetrip. Chargetrip is powering the routing technology behind many of the largest EV ecosystems, giving them a unique perspective on how drivers really behave and how utilization actually grows. Gideon, welcome to the show.
Hi.
For our listeners who may not know Chargetrip yet, can you give us a quick overview of what you do and why routing matters so much for EV adoption?
Sure, absolutely. It's nice seeing you again. I think we met a couple of weeks back at ICNC.
Yeah, it's great to have you here, Gideon.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thanks so much for the invite. Yeah, so I mean, I run a company called Chargetrip, and for anyone that doesn't know, we're a B2B company, and we specialize in predicting the mechanical energy required to drive an EV from one point to another point. And we leverage that intelligence to help our customers enhance the driving and charging experience through smarter discovery and routing. So essentially what that means is if you go between two cities in an EV, there's a demand for energy to drive that trip, and we're really good at predicting that demand. And if you know exactly how much energy a trip will require, then we can recommend the optimal charging stops along the way. And those recommendations, they add up. During the summer holidays alone, we guided nearly 3 million routes, and that represents around 250 gigawatt hours of energy demand. So that's a lot of charge sessions. And so our customers, they integrate our routing into their applications, like you said, and they can set business rules where we send that energy demand. So if, for example, a CPO integrates our routing, then of course, whenever we can, we'll send that energy demand to one of their stations, and that helps them maximize their yield and utilizations. And it gives them a better control over the driving and charging experience. Yeah. So in a nutshell, that's what we do.
Cool. Yeah, it's a very technical and specialist solution, right?
Very boutique-y.
Yeah, exactly. You told me last time when we met, like it's really interesting to hear also your story, like why did you started this, and yeah, there's a lot to it, and a lot of people don't actually know that they're using Chargetrip because it's integrated in a CPO app, but
Yeah, we just like to do the mathematics in the background, but yeah,
exactly.
we put a brand on it.
Yeah. So Gideon, let's start with the big picture. You have visibility in a lot of charging networks across Europe and North America. And from your perspective, like why do so many CPOs hit a ceiling in their growth? What's going on there?
That's a really tricky question, and I don't want to sit on their seat, of course.
Mm-hmm.
So I think from our perspective, if you look at there's a couple of things going on, but mostly we have invested in a lot of infrastructure over the last couple of years. And when charge point operators, I'm assuming everyone on this audience knows what a charge point operator is.
Yeah.
Okay.
I
So
assume the same, but
yeah,
otherwise,
so
yeah,
these
happy to
are,
explain.
these are the companies that have to buy or lease concessions and then install infrastructure, and essentially they end up selling electrons. They're just a greengrocer, but they sell different type of product. But the way most CPOs were looking at their unit economics or at the instrumentalization of this business case is very much like a real estate play. So we're buying land and then we're building infrastructure. And because of that, this land will become more valuable. And so a lot of the business decisions or the funding decisions that go into building out a business case for charging is based on this real estate playbook where in fact, it's all about just being able to get drivers to use your product and then sell this product. So the value is derived actually from a service that you're providing, a product that you're providing, and not so much the value of the land. And I think that's That's what we're kind of figuring out right now, and that means that the industry is kind of transitioning a little bit as they start to wrap their heads around what that means. Like, because now it becomes important not so much to build out infrastructure, it becomes important to capture your target audience, the driver. And that's really tricky if you don't have really good visibility. So if access and discovery is not so easy because these are stations, they're essentially a cable coming from the ground, right? They don't have such a big brand equity yet. And it's also they're just physically a little bit harder to spot. I think I'm not a marketeer, but from your background, probably one of the biggest problems they're facing within utilization is just core visibility. How do they capture this audience? And that's just really hard. They don't have control over it. So you see that CPOs are sort of slowly foraying into the EMSP layer because having an app and having a charge card and having just a channel to reach your customer gives them a little bit more control over this guidance problem. Like, how do you get them to your stations? But I think that, so just to get back to your question, the core problem here is utilization. And it comes because they don't have a direct way to access the driver. And this comes from, a focus on building an infrastructure, kind of a real estate business, and not so much a customer facing business, which is in the end what it is. Um, yeah.
Yeah, I fully agree there. That's exactly what's going on with CPOs and the switch they have to make, like more focus on the consumer and not so much on the technology and the network itself. Like I also believe that the network is there, the technology can be trusted, but the end user, it doesn't have any preference yet. Like, well, some of them might have for a few CPOs, but in general, like this is a big switch in marketing from more B2B related marketing, finding those locations to build a charging location, towards like shifting towards the EV driver right now, explaining how it works, why it's so easy, why it's so fun to drive an EV, why come charge with your specific brand. Like that's indeed happening at the moment. We see the same. Like Gideon, if you look at what you guys are doing with routing engines or routing, like I should probably say, how does that involve decisions from EV drivers where to charge? How do you influence this?
So one of the big paradigm shifts that we identified a long time ago, actually, for people that are considering switching from ICE, so from internal combustion engines to EVs, are all these anxieties that play up. Now, I think we're all aware, especially in this podcast and the people listening to it, that these anxieties are often not realistic, but they are very true for people, right? And so I'm talking about rage anxiety, charging
Yeah.
anxiety, everything else. I mean, we've debated this for years now, and even though they're not realistic, they're very true in the minds of people that are thinking about switching. The main problem with electric mobility is that you're buying this future. You're buying into the future, but the experience paradigm, like the actual experience that you get when you get an electric vehicle, is for a large part feels like a puzzle. Right? It's just everything is different. It's inherently different than an ICE. So even though instant torque is an incredible experience, like driving these things is amazing. But if you are a family, or if you need to rely on this to make sure it doesn't affect your TCO, if you own a business and this is like very critical, then this puzzle makes it scary to go through this electrification, to go through the adoption of this technology. And we essentially just wanted to take that away. Like, we think it's just very silly that you're buying this future product, but there's all these anxiety that plague it. And computers are just really good at solving for that. So that's essentially how we got into it. But this is, I think, the core problem, or the sort of what we experience in these early years, is that a lot of these early adopters are not a very good representation of the entire population. So this experience that you get when you operate an electric vehicle, it should be equal or better than owning an ICE. The entire experience just needs to be better. It needs to be on point. It shouldn't be a puzzle ride when you get to a station. It shouldn't feel strange that you don't know with what card to pay. There shouldn't be this massive disparity in pricing at J's stations, right? Depending on what card you have in your car, you're paying maybe 40% more or less. That's just crazy stuff. So all those types of realities that are introduced with this electrification or with this switch, we just want to take it away, make it as smooth and as transparent as possible for people driving.
So how does Chargetrip and routing solve
Yeah.
this problem? Like what's your role in this?
So we just try to take away all those little Yeah, those little insecurities, all those
Mhm.
anxiety-inducing puzzle pieces that people encounter, right? We just want to make it from A to B. We want to make it as seamless as you've always been used to in your ICE vehicle. Because if you do that, it just becomes a technology that people can trust. And so we want to build trust for drivers. And then on the other side, we want to build brand trust for CPOs and EMSP solutions. We want to make sure that when customers end up at those stations, they have an incredible experience, that everything is exactly like they were going to expect it. The station is available. You can pay there. There's something to do. If you've got kids with you, then there's a playground for your kids to play at, or there's a restaurant if you're hungry. Like all these, or the most basic things, there's a bathroom. It's just if you're an EV, yeah, I mean, you've been driving EVs for a while, I'm sure. Just going to the bathroom and getting gas has been synonymous. So if I charge, I want to be able to use a bathroom. It's such a basic thing. Like all those little things where we kind of glance over. I mean, it's completely controls how you emotionally experience owning one of these vehicles and operating it. For personal drivers, that's the case, but for commercial vehicles, that's even more relevant because now your business case depends on it. So encountering a 40% downtime on charge sessions when you have an electrified fleet and you need to make your deliveries is problematic. That
Yeah,
just
for
can't
sure.
happen. So then you make the decision not to electrify. And of course, we don't want that. We want people to electrify. So we need to solve for all these complexities and these puzzle pieces. And that's essentially what Chargetrip does.
Right. And can you maybe you have a practical example, like how does this work? So the way I understand it, like many CPOs are using your engine, so it's in their app, right? So if you plan a route in the app, then that's basically what ChargeTrip does for you, right? So I imagine you can select different options there, different search criteria for charging stations, and it will give you a route with the right stations for you. Is that how it works, or is there more to it?
Essentially, that's how it works. But there's loads of heuristics that play into that, and there's loads of business rules that you can set. So mechanical energy is not rocket science, but because of how a battery works, because of the energy density, and because of all the outside impact variables, predicting the exact energy demand for a route is pretty difficult to do. You need loads of telemetry data. You need to train your models because there's just the impact of driving uphill with a vehicle that maybe your tire pressure is not exactly what it should have been and it's starting to rain and maybe the barometric pressure is just a little bit different than you would have expected or the vehicle expects. Like all those different impact variables, they make a massive impact on the range, and so solving for that is pretty tricky. That's kind of where it starts. So we solve for that type of complexity, and then once you integrate the API, that intelligence allows you to start recommending charge stations, and that solves a driver problem. But then on the other side, it poses an opportunity for the CPO because whenever you recommend a charge stop, you can influence that recommendation. So for CPO X, will try and recommend as many of their stations along routes that are being planned as possible without having a negative effect on the driver, of course. So there's business rules and so on. And then for CPOY, we'll do the same thing, but we'll recommend their stations. And this pattern increases the utilization for these CPOs. And it's super flexible, so they can change it per region, they can change it per driver profile, they can create entire rankings of other CPOs that they would send the demand to if their station is not available or preferable, and so on. So that's a really flexible system that essentially allows the CPOs or EMSPs to increase their utilization, but also to create rankings and increase utilizations for their partners, for example.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And you have a lot of data available, I assume, in your backend. And we get a lot of questions from mainly from CPOs. Like they all want to figure out how EV drivers decide where to charge. And because of that, we also done quite a lot of research on this topic. And we always get back from EV drivers that when they drive a long distance, you do some planning ahead of your travel, but a lot of changes might happen along the way. So you might decide to go to another station than the one that you plan to visit. Do you have any insights in your data about these topics? Like, is there anything you can see how people actually decide where to charge, or any changes along the way if they plan a route? Like, what changes? Is that kind of data that you have available?
Yeah, we have data points to kind of infer these types of behaviors. I think Like there's loads of research into this, right? So there's loads of research into what are defining anxieties for people, why they want to be able to pre-plan routes, or why there's discovery and access before people get into the vehicle. I think there's loads of research there, and there was this pretty interesting study by GridX which came out not that long ago. Yeah, from their respondents, it's still 70% of people that really put effort into pre-planning. Uh,
Hmm.
and this can be longer trips, but also shorter trips. I think one interesting data point, maybe is quite a funny one, is that charging and parking is becoming pretty synonymous. So we have actually a lot of people that use our services, not necessarily to plan out an entire route, just because they know where they're going, but they still want to kind of plan a route just to figure out if there's a charging opportunity wherever they need to go. So then you see loads of very short routes with people just trying to figure out, I need to be at this, this address, but I want to make sure that I get the charge there because it feels like a wasted opportunity if I don't. So there's that kind of anecdotal stuff in the data. When it comes to really selecting stations, I mean, we're of course in the business of pre-selecting stations for people, but we also, I think our view on routing specifically and on recommending charge stations is to give people as much flexibility when it comes to finding stations as possible. So because the main aim is to make sure that everything feels seamless for them. So we'll make recommendations on where we think you should stop the charge, but we're very aware of the behavior that you just described, right? People getting on the road and then plans change. So either that could be detour or traffic, or it could just be, hey, I want to stop here because I know that there's a restaurant there and I'm hungry. Or you're driving past something and you're like, well, I'm not. It's a little bit colder than I expected, so people start to do all these mental calculations and figure out, okay, maybe I want to get off a little bit earlier. So we see a lot of recalculations. So a
Okay.
lot of our customers also implement subscriptions with us where they calculate routes or kind of provide the feature of calculating routes for people that before they get into a car, but then once they start driving, there's a subscription system that will update routes as you go. So that
Hmm.
either works with telemetry data that comes straight from the vehicle, or it works through user input, right? They charge somewhere earlier, then they recalculate. Or we just look at a delta between predicted state of charge and then the actual state of charge coming from the vehicle or the user, and they kind of replan their route as they drive along. So there's those data points. What makes a station really attractive is kind of what I think I infer from your question, right? Like
Yeah.
what makes people really pick? It's mostly convenience and cost. Right.
Hmm.
So convenience is super important. So with convenience, I mean kind of reliability, amenities, and so on. Right. So it's like how was your experience at that station or operator? If it's a
Yeah.
great experience, you start to build brand trust. If it's a bad experience, you really only seem to have one shot at it, right? If
Yeah.
people have
Exactly.
one bad experience, like it is so like if you have two kids in the back of a car, you end up at charge station and it's 9 in the evening and you still need to get home and the kids need to go to school tomorrow and everyone is kind of tired and it's been a long day and the station doesn't work, you
Hmm.
are voiding that CPO from now on. Like
Yeah.
it's that. Right? It is so you get one shot at it. So you really, really convenience is so it's I know that a lot of people think it's cost and cost, yeah, cost is important, but it's convenience. Like you just want good experience. You see it with the Spark Alliance, for example, right? That alliance exists to create an incredible user experience because these CPOs kind of select each other because they offer a kind of a premium charging experience with a lot of trust. And that's so important
I
for.
wanted to say it's so much about trust in the market, like building that trust. Like if you come to us, you always have a good experience. You can depend on the chargers, and yeah, that's also what we see a lot happening in the market.
Yeah. So I mean, we like, for me, it's hard to kind of, I'm very biased, right? I mean, our product is to route energy demand to certain CPOs and we get paid for that. We do it because we want people to have an incredible experience using this technology, because we think it's extremely important that we accelerate the advent of sustainable transportation. But I'm very biased. But I do think as an EV driver, and I've been driving for a long time, as an EV driver, you internalize these operators that you know you can trust. Like, I know know I'm not going to be disappointed there. And sometimes I even pass something that I think, okay, maybe I should be charging, but I know I can wait for that operator because I know they're going to give me, like, I know it's going to be a good, I know there's a bathroom. I know that the station will work and so on. And with some, you also really, you had a bad experience and you will avoid them. It's just, it's that simple. So it's a very high stakes game, increasing this utilization. You better get it right.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like you say, you have one chance to do it right, and otherwise you'll lose that customer. So, yeah, absolutely. Talking about all this, Gideon, like how do you see your clients use this in their marketing strategies? Like how do they take the learnings from the routing, for example, and take that into marketing? Is there any strategies that you see that work really well?
Yeah, so we work in an extremely challenging environment because these CPOs, but also EMSPs and also our fleet customers and all these customers, they rely on us and on our technology because it really impacts their utilization. It impacts their way of making money. Anecdotally, you have CPOs that say, well, I'm pouring money, for example, into Google just because I'm buying ads, but I'm not actually seeing any increase on utilization versus some of our customers that notice, 20% increase in utilization at certain stations because, these are locations that people just don't discover on their own. But if you route them there, it's absolutely fine. These are great stations. They're maybe just, 2 minutes off the highway, which happens loads in Germany and in France and so on.
Yeah, so how your technology plays out in marketing. So how do your clients use it and turn that into marketing strategies
Yeah,
that
I mean,
work? And
from a marketing perspective, and again, I'm not a marketeer, but because it's such a high stake environment, they do loads of A/B testing and they do loads of customer research. So the reason they integrate routing, mostly it's through customer demand. So it's people saying, well, we want to have a better way of discovering stations, not necessarily routing on its own, but just a better way of discovering stations. And then internally, it is their incentive to make sure that they own the driver experience, that they own where this goes. So I think within marketing, we see them run campaigns around discovery and access, so routing specifically. And then we're now starting to see, but it's still early days. We're starting to see specifically within the commercial vehicle segments that routing offers this opportunity of cost optimization for your existing driver base, right? So if you've electrified and you're all giving them a charge card, that charge card will unlock certain rates at certain CPOs, but other rates at other CPOs. And you as a business owner, it's super important for you that your drivers go to the most optimal charge station given the card that they have to
yeah.
make sure that their rate is the best it can be because it has a massive impact on your variable costs, right? On your charging cost. So we're starting to see marketing around this specific topic, cost optimization through better station selection, which is kind of new. That's kind of a new thing that we're seeing.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. If you think about the commercial vehicle industry, like this is a completely different ballgame, right? You also want to plan your charging stops ahead of time so the driver knows where to go. And if there's like a traffic jam and he's delayed, then there should be another one that the routing sends this driver to. Is that something you do as well? Is that part of your business?
Yeah, it's something we do as well. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
cool.
so we're in loads of these kind of industry verticals, just doing the maths.
Yeah, exactly.
But, kind of behind the scenes. But yeah, it's definitely there's to a large extent, the commercial vehicle segment is even more critical, right? There's more, it has a bigger impact on emissions, right? It's like we still need to electrify 350 million commercial electric vehicles, and we're just at the start of this. And we're finally seeing the supply chain loosen up a little bit more. So there's more sort of class 5 and up vehicles coming to market, which is very exciting. And there's stricter regulation and stricter legislation even. So there's a lot moving there. And for us, it's interesting because we're relevant through the entire kind of electrification journey from inception. So figuring out how do I right size my batteries? Because just buying if you go to your dealership, they'll just try and sell you the biggest battery. And it's the most expensive component of this vehicle. So getting that right really has a big impact on your OPEX and your CAPEX, right? It's a
Yeah,
massive impact. And so we can help there because, you give us a year worth of your driving data from your diesel vans, and we'll run those in an afternoon and give you almost like a digital twin, as if all those routes had been driven by an electrical equivalent of those ICE vehicles. And then all of a sudden you understand, well, I don't need 80 kilowatt hour batteries. I need like the 42 pack for 80% of these.
exactly.
Massive CapEx savings, right?
Yeah,
And then once you go into operation, there's all these other complexities. Like figuring out, well, if I have these tours that I need to drive tomorrow, how far should I charge these vehicles today? Because again, just charging them to 80%, which is the obvious solution, makes no sense in a commercial setting where you might have a depot with 4 chargers but 20 vans. Don't just charge all of them to 80%. You should charge them to the exact amount of SOC with some margin that you're going to use tomorrow.
they need. Yeah,
Yeah, then you can kind of daisy chain them and charge more during sort of off-peak hours. So you're even optimizing for cost there.
yeah,
And then there's other things. There's like figuring out, well, which of these routes can I electrify? Are there ones where maybe, the distances are so long or the vehicles are so inefficient or I have so much weight that I shouldn't electrify them yet. I should wait. I should first electrify these.
mm,
There's so many complexities. So if you thought that there's a lot of anxiety for personal drivers, for commercial vehicle drivers, especially the owners of those fleets, it's worse. It's way worse because like the margins within logistics are so thin, and the impact of electrification is the scope of whether that goes well or the range, whether that goes well or whether it has a really negative impact to your TCO is massive. There's loads of stuff that we do there, and it's super fun because it's complex problems, which we really like.
yeah. The stakes are high, and your data is super valuable. I imagine. So,
So we need to get it right.
yeah, exactly. Gideon, if you were like a CMO at a charge point operator, like if you would talk to someone like that and they don't have any routing engine yet, like what would you say? How would you explain this? Like, why is this so important?
So I always try to approach things from an optimization. That's just my nature. It's my background. Like
Mm-hmm.
I look at it as a number problem and how can we optimize for that problem. But I think the sort of the byline there is electrification has a massive impact on cost, right? It's sort of the instrumentalization of your business throughout the entire business will be impacted by it. And the tricky bit is because it's so kind of verbose, it's so opaque, like there's so much unknowns in it. Getting a better understanding of what that's going to look like, creating that visibility will have a massive impact on whether you're able to navigate the journey well or not so well. And that's true for EMSP propositions, CPO propositions, but it's especially true within commercial electrification. You need clear visibility so you can make better business decisions. So from a CMO, a marketing perspective, again, I'm not a marketer, but my core value driver would be cost optimization, and then especially the opportunities where EVs can actually outperform ICE fleets. Because there is a way of electrification where it has an absolute positive impact on your TCO, but there's sort of a thin bandwidth on how to do that. But yeah, I think you, from a marketing perspective, you are clearly more knowledgeable than me.
Yeah, but it's absolutely like you say. If you look at like marketing, it starts before the driver even sees a charger, right? And that's also
Correct.
where this routing comes in, but also where data analysis can give you a lot of valuable insights. On one hand, we work a lot on research in the market. We talk to a lot of EV drivers. We also talk to a lot of business owners, fleet managers, for example. But on the other hand, there's so much you can learn from the behavior that EV drivers show already today. So I think that's also where your solution is super valuable. Is there anything, Gideon?
So
Yeah.
how do you answer those questions? Like this is your core business, right? And so how do you approach these CMOs at these CPOs? Like, is it all about visibility? Is that what you're saying?
Well, at the moment, yes, a lot is about visibility. Like we all know that CPOs are looking into increasing utilization. They might also have some locations where utilization is low, and they're looking into solutions on how to increase this. I was really triggered with your explanation about Chargetrip and how routing will help, like driving traffic to specific locations. That's super valuable. On our end, like from a marketing perspective, we work a lot on visibility of locations, and that starts with being visible on the main apps like Google and Apple Maps, for example. There are a lot of issues there, but also showing up in the data from OEMs. So making sure that if somebody is looking for a charging station in the vehicle, that also your location is visible there. And the other thing is like general visibility and building trust from your brand perspective is also really important. And what we've seen so far, like a lot of CPOs have been focusing on building these charging locations and not so much on building trust and building their brand itself. So that's where it should come together, like what we call local marketing. So ensuring visibility of a charging location on Google Maps, for example. You can do a lot of advertising there, not just locally, but also towards audiences that you have calculated that would potentially charge at that specific location. So it's not always local traffic. A lot of times it's people passing by, like maybe on their daily route to work. And so those are also the audiences you should target in your advertising. So creating all that visibility is very important. And like I said, on the other hand, building the trust, making sure that the charger works properly. There's a good experience on the location. There's clear signage, like all of that, like up to the little details are important to make sure that people have a good experience there. But for us, like from a marketing perspective, it's a lot about building trust, about being visible both locally in the local markets, but especially in the markets that where the people come from that you expect that will be charging there. And that's where a lot of mistakes are being made. A lot of CPOs have opened locations by putting chargers there. Maybe there are a couple of amenities because of the retail partner on site, but that's about it. And there's so much more that needs to be done. And that's what I always say to CPOs as well. Like if you open a new location, celebrate it. Make sure you have a team there for the first week or at least for a couple of days. Put on some beach flags, like have a party to show that the location is now open. That also attracts traffic because people see there's something going on there and they will come and have a look. And if it's relevant for them, they will charge. And they will have that first experience. And it will be a good experience because you're there and you show them how it works and how great it is to charge. And all of that comes to play in the market at the moment. And in my opinion, and you also confirm that, Gideon, with your story, is that in the past, if you put a charger in the ground, people would come because you need a charger and there's no competition there. But today, there are 3, 4, sometimes 5 brands available at a certain location. So how do you drive that preference? Why would people come and charge with you? And that's what we're building these days. And that's where visibility comes into play. Like that's where trust is really important. Talking about loyalty, for example, there's so much you can do, but it starts with the foundation. And with a lot of CPOs, the foundation is not there yet.
Yep. Yeah, it's very still very early days. Can I ask you a follow-up question? Assuming this is interesting, by the way, for the audience of this podcast, but how do you see loyalty programs and then specifically couponing, for example? So where you might get a discount on something if you charge at that location. I mean, there's been schemes where you might even get like for any minute that you charge there, you might get a discount on your bill at a say supermarket chain, right?
Yeah.
How do you see that play in? Because I know that's been discussed quite a lot lately, and I'm just wondering whether you think that's going to be effective, and also what the role will be for retailers,
Yeah.
since they seem to be moving into the CPO space.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's a huge opportunity for retailers. And that aside, like those partnerships between CPOs and retailers can be super valuable. And I don't believe, and we also see that in the research that we do, that price campaigns, they can be relevant, but a lot of EV drivers are not paying for the energy themselves. So then price campaigns don't work that well. Like they don't care about the price of charging. They care, let's be honest, they care about what's in it for them. So if you would have a nice promotion with a retailer on site that you get a free coffee or a discount on your lunch, that might work really well. We've done some testing for a
You
big
got data
European
on that?
CPO.
Like, does that really work well?
Yes, we've seen that this was actually a couple of years ago already where we did this testing and it worked pretty well. You could see that people would actually go in to a restaurant with that discount coupon that they got because they were charging there and they get a discount on their lunch, for example, or a free coffee or things like that. That works. If it builds enough trust to come back to that specific location all the time, maybe, but it's a clear signal that you care about the EV driver. And that's where you start building trust. So even if it's a small discount on something like a lunch or a coffee, it already works. Like it's a first step in building trust. But in general, we also explored loyalty systems for CPOs. Like you could get a discount on your car wash, or after charging for, I don't know, 10 times, you get a free car wash at a specific local car wash. Like things like that also work. So there's a lot you can do there, but I would
Why don't
especially
we see
advise.
more of that then?
Yeah, good question. Like it's because the market wasn't there yet, I believe. CPOs now start to realize that they need to build this trust and they need to focus more on the EV driver. While in the past they didn't really care about that. They thought like, okay, we built the locations, the charger is there, hopefully the experience is set up properly so people will go there. And now they start realizing that that's not always the case. And maybe they come once because they need to charge, but how do you make sure that they come back? How do you make sure you build that brand trust and that loyalty? And that's where things start changing now. And that's why a lot of CPOs are looking into loyalty and all of that. It's a relevant topic at the moment,
Yeah.
especially also with the utilization increase that's needed at a lot of sites. Loyalty and trust is the main issue. Yeah, that's why this is relevant now. A few years ago, they didn't, like I said, they didn't really care about these kind of topics, but now they start to realize that this is important, and that's why we see these loyalty schemes popping up now, and campaigns and pricing, and there's everything. Like it's a big mix of topics that are relevant, obviously, but it's like, I think you also said it, Gideon, that it's also what we see in our research when talking to EV drivers. It starts with the location being there when somebody needs to charge. Then it's all about trust, making sure that people can trust that your charger always works, they have a good experience, otherwise they won't come back. That's the second thing that's super important. Amenities come up a lot in these research. So people want like a toilet, they want to get a coffee or a playground for their kids that have been in the back of the car for 2 hours and now they can go out and there's nothing to do there. Like those things are also very important. And then you can talk about price and other topics, but those are the main topics that will help build trust and will get EV drivers to come back to your stations. And if you do it well at one location, if your brand is there and done properly, then they will come back to another location with your brand because you build that trust. They know they can trust you. They can trust your chargers. There will be amenities that they're looking for. Like that's the way to build trust in the industry.
Yeah, I have this hypothesis that, within maybe 18 months, we'll see a retailer, like a really strong retail brand, stand up and roll out an incredible HPC network. I know there's some that are trying it, but there's just something so copacetic about having really well-developed, trustworthy retail locations like a Starbucks, plus a massive loyalty card. I think they have the biggest loyalty program in the world. I mean, knocking wood here, but and I think even that card already takes like you can put money on it, right? So
Mhm.
they're already taking that on the books. So that kind of it makes for such an interesting proposition to add supplemental revenue streams
Absolutely.
to that existing business. And then charging is so interesting because it has this inherent valuable dwell time.
Yeah.
And what I really like from from an entrepreneurial perspective is that these types of companies, they don't think in electrons. Their unit is cups of coffee.
Yeah.
Cups
Yeah.
of coffee just calculate very nicely. Or
Absolutely.
hamburgers or something.
It's an easy
Like
business case. Yeah.
it's a
Yeah.
That's if I drive a couple more cups of coffee a day to your location, that's worth something.
Yeah.
And it's an easier discussion than, this amount of gigawatt hours or something.
Absolutely.
This is my hypothesis. I don't
Yeah.
have
Yeah. Yeah.
inside information, but I just feel
Yeah. I
that
want.
this is going to happen. And, I think we've got really strong CPO brands now. I've got Sparkle Lines, right? We've got the Electros and the Ionities of this world that are just trying to build an absolute best in class experience. And they're doing, I mean, hats off. Like, love these CPOs that like what they're building.
It's a really interesting topic. And it's like, I wanted to say that one of the things I always advise CPOs to make sure that you have a very strong B2B proposition, that you explain to retailers what the value is of having EV chargers on your site. Because like you said, it drives much more traffic. Like there's so much you can do when people need to charge. They're at your location. So it's very easy to make them come in. And if you own a restaurant or a shop, they will come in, they will have a look, they will get a coffee, like whatever it is you're selling. And that's a very interesting business case for retailers. And like you said, I like the example of Carrefour in France, for example. They're building the fast charging network with Allego, and they've done that really, really well. There are a lot of locations there. It's connected to their loyalty card, like all of that. These retailers have these loyalty systems in place already. So it's very easy to add EV charging to it. There's so much possible there. There's so much value for both the retailer and the CPO. And I think those partnerships, they become much more important in the future. And like you said, if you are a big retailer, there's an enormous value in working with a CPO to offer charging at your locations. And you see it happening with McDonald's, for example. There's always a fast charger there. With the Burger King, like all of these retail chains, they understand that they need to offer this to get more people into their stores. That's the way it works. And I like the coffee example that you gave because it's easy to calculate, but it's the essential of these partnerships.
And it's like, it feels like very low barrier entry point for value creation for drivers, right? There's just, I imagine this, paying for a charge with whether that's, an electric card, an Ionity card, a Fastening card or whatever, but the Starbucks version of this, like there's the Air Blue version of an Amex Platinum card, right? Like I imagine doing that and saving like a point on my Starbucks loyalty card every time I visit a random CPO. But when I charge at a Starbucks location, I get 2 points.
Exactly.
Like there's just, it's so low barrier to start creating value, both for the existing loyalty customer as well as a supplemental revenue stream. It's we'll see.
Yeah.
I hope I'm right, because then it's another opportunity to get people to the right
Also
places.
for routing, this is an
Yeah,
important
for
topic.
sure.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. Well, I
yeah.
also believe in the US, you see a lot of retailers working on this, like adding EV charging to their locations. Like they really see
Walmart.
the
Yeah,
value of it.
Walmart
Yeah,
is moving
Walmart.
in. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
you've got really cool kind of new, even just hardware manufacturers like Electric Era that are focusing specific on retail locations, and they offer like additional services to make sure that there's utilization on these stations and so on. And they offer like nice POS, point of sale, on the charging station, so you can order your cup of coffee even when you're plugging in and so on. There's a lot of stuff happening there. It's quite exciting.
Absolutely. So Gideon, like looking at the time before we close, like I have one final question for you. What's the biggest mistake you see CPO marketeers make today?
Just sitting back and thinking the traffic will come.
Yeah, good one.
So it's like, it's this paradigm, right? If you build it, they will come. I mean, that's just not true. And it has nothing to do with ability, right? It's just how we got into this market. It now turns out that the market is looking kind of different from what we expected. We've invested, and probably in some places over-invested in infrastructure, which is a strange thing to say, but we can be really proud in some places in Europe at how well developed our infrastructure is. That's job well done. But if your utilization rate is between, 11 and 17%, and I think that's being generous,
Yeah, definitely.
then it's a real issue. Like, we've built up this incredible infrastructure, but there's just too little use on it. And the use is not gonna happen by itself. Like, you need to be able to capture your driver. It is so important. You need access to the consumer. Like, we know this from any other industry, but with charging, we just think people are magically gonna appear. That's
Yeah,
not the case.
yeah.
So there's a demand, and we can quantify and express that demand, but how that demand's add up at your location, that's a different story. And that's kind of yeah. So I think that's probably my answer.
Right. I can only agree with you. Like, it's all about building preference now, and that's also where routing comes in. So I like the combination of marketing and routing, and there's so much possible these days. So let's leave it with this, Gideon. Like, if people want to know more about Chargetrip, like, where should they go?
If they haven't heard of us yet, just visit our website, chargetrip.com. We've got an app called go.chargetrip.com. It's a web app. It's progressive, works on your phone. But if you're like interested in technology, this gives you really good insight on how it works. It's not a B2C proposition, but it just uses our own API and gives you it's a really good idea of what routing can do. And of course, we're on LinkedIn. You can find either me or one of our 40 colleagues posting about this kind of stuff. So yeah, just connect with us, and love to help you figure out your utilization problems.
Well, thanks, Gideon. We'll add the links to the notes of the podcast as well, so people can easily find it. So thanks again for being here. I really enjoyed our conversation today.
Thank you.
To our listeners, if you enjoyed this conversation as well, make sure to subscribe and share it with your colleagues, and stay tuned for the next episode of the eMobility Marketing Podcast.